Hello everyone, thanks for joining me. I've had several of you ask me over the past several months about teaching a cold process soap class. And I know that not all of you live in town here with me, so I decided to create a video for you so that you could go back and follow. I have really enjoyed making cold process soap for a lot of reasons. I love knowing the products that we're using on our skin, in my home, for my family, for myself. And I love knowing what ingredients I'm using in the process. It's also a very creative process, and it's something that I've really enjoyed doing because there's just something magical about creating something and how that just makes you feel like you've really just accomplished something. So before I get started, I just wanted to talk about a few topics. The first is your fats. I'm going to share the recipe that I'm using today in a link below this, but I want to talk about why I use organic fats in the process. When plants and animals are exposed to toxins, many of the toxins tend to be fat soluble. And that means that they're going to be located in the fatty substance of the product. So whether it's the plant oils or even within us. Most of the toxins tend to stay in the fatty tissue. And so what's really important for me is to use just the organic fat, as many organic fats as I can have access to, because I know that it has the least amount of sprayed on toxins that have been used on those plants. So that is why I choose to use organic products. I have made my mold for the soap making process is this little wooden mold, and it was something that I made myself. I went to the big box hardware store and found this board here. It looks like a 1/4 of an inch, maybe 1/2 an inch, and actually it was 1/2 an inch by 4 inches by 3 feet. So, and then I had them cut it down into all the different pieces that I needed at the big box hardware store, and then came home and glued them all together. I made 2 of them, so this is one, and this is the one that we're going to be using tonight. And what I've done here is I've just lined it with some parchment paper, and then I've just used some masking tape to hold it down into place. It doesn't really matter if it has wrinkles in it. The one thing that I just do pay attention to is that it doesn't have any tears into it, because if it tears, then when I pour the soap into it, then it's going to leak out underneath the parchment paper. I'm a big proponent of using many of the materials that you have, but there are some things that I did pick up separately because I didn't want to use, for example, the same pot for mixing my oils and my lye that I use for cooking. And so when I initially picked up these supplies, I looked for sales and I looked for different things just around town, just to find something economical as well. All right, this is my kitchen scale. It's just what I had. I didn't go out and buy it just for the purpose of cold process soap making. It was something that I just had. It gives me the option of displaying the weight in both ounces, pounds, or in grams. When it displays in ounces, though, it does not give me a decimal point. And so I do need some of that information. So I have converted my ounce measurements into grams because I get more decimal points here with my scale. And this is my little cheat sheet. So I went ahead and I've written down each of the ingredients that we have in the recipe and how much I need weighed. I've already weighed out my water, and I want to take a minute just to talk about the water and the lye. So measuring out my water is my first step once I get started. It's the first thing that I weigh. I picked up this glass pitcher from Hobby Lobby, and I love using this glass pitcher for mixing my lye together because when I swirl to mix, I don't get any water splashing out. And so right now this is just water, and that's great. But once I add lye, that's my lye solution. And it's very basic, and it has the potential to cause burns if you're not careful. And so that is one reason that I really love using this glass pitcher, because it really allows me to swirl and mix it and not have it splash out. Now, I pick up my lye at an Ace True Value hardware store here in town. Nothing special. It is, I believe, 99.9% sodium hydroxide. Oh, it's 100%. So 100%, and that's what you need. So I'm going to go ahead and measure a few things out here real quick, and I'll be back in just a minute to show you some of the mix. Thanks for joining me. You can't see me right now, but you will in a minute. But I have my pitcher of water here in the sink, and I've got my lye already measured out here that's needed for this recipe. And you always want to make sure that you add the lye to the water. There is an exothermic reaction, meaning it's going to give off heat, and you always want to make sure that you add the solid material to the liquid. Okay, once I've poured it into the pitcher, I like to just take it and just swirl it. All right, so I'm just going to let this sit here in the sink. It's really hot, and so it needs to cool down to be under 120 degrees Fahrenheit. But in the meantime, I'm going to head back over. Yep, I wear safety goggles and gloves. So just for this step, but I'm going to go ahead back over here and measure out some of my fats. I'll be back with you here in just a minute. Thanks for joining me again. The next step in the process, the lye is already mixed and it's sitting in the sink waiting to cool down. In the meantime, I've got to melt all the fats together. And what I like to do is I like to measure out my different fats, particularly the ones that are solid first, and put them in my pot. This way it allows them to slowly start melting together I put it on the heat, and they start to slowly melt together. The last fat that I add is my olive oil, and that's because my olive oil is already solid, it is already liquid, so it doesn't need to get melted. And I also find that it helps to cool down my fats, because my fats actually have to be at a cooler temperature than my lye solution does. So I'm going to go ahead and measure these out real quick, and then I will be back to show you what that looks like. Hi friends, I'm back. Okay, so here I have shea butter, coconut oil, and red palm oil currently here in the pot. I'm saving my olive oil. It's already been measured out, but I'm waiting to add it because it doesn't need to melt. I'm turning on the heat, and I am gonna watch this just kind of melt down and all become liquid. As you can tell, the shea butter is probably the one that takes the longest. I wanted to talk just for a few minutes here real quick and show you the red palm oil. A lot of recipes call for palm oil. Most people use the stuff that's been filtered. The reason that I like the red palm oil first is in actually using the soap afterwards, I feel like it makes the bar a little harder. And so I really like that firmer bar in the shower. And I also like, of course, that it is non-GMO and that it is grown under conditions that make it sustainable. So that is why I like using this brand. In terms of the shea butter, I use just whatever brand I happen to have gotten. I do prefer the certified grade A shea butter, but again, strictly up to you and your preference. I just want to give you an update here. It's only been about a minute since I put on the flame, and as you can see here, everything's kind of melting and coming along great. This step really doesn't take that long, and you know, it's moving along really nicely. So you can see here that all of the fats that I had here warming up on the stove have melted. And what I'm going to do now is add in my olive oil. All right, and that is just going to stay here in this pot. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the lye solution has to be below 120 degrees Fahrenheit, and the fat solution has to be even cooler than that. So I have a food temperature gauge, and I am just going to put it in here and see what the temperature reading is. It's really important that right now I've placed it into the fat, but I want to make sure that I'm not touching the metal when I'm taking the temperature. I want it to be in the melted fat into the liquid, but not touching the pot at all. Okay, and right now I have a temperature of my fats at about 120 degrees. Okay, so I'm going to head over to the sink and also look at my lye solution, see what the temperature is on that so that I can gauge. And once they've cooled off, I'll be back and we'll take the next step and put them together. Okay, I'm back. It's been probably about 20 to 30 minutes. In the meantime, I've gone ahead and cleaned up my kitchen, and I've been monitoring the temperature of both my fats and also my lye solution. And they've dropped, the fats are just below 100 degrees, and my lye solution is at about 110 degrees Fahrenheit. So a few other supplies that we're going to need. I love using an immersion blender or a stick blender. It really helps to mix everything really well. And I'm also going to need my essential oils. I prefer to use pure essential oils instead of fragrance, just because my kids are sensitive to different fragrances that are synthetic, but they do really well with the natural essential oils. And then something that's optional and something I wanted to mention before I started pouring and mixing things in is the use of an additive. I don't know if that's really the right word, but you can also choose to add poppy seed or cacao nibs into your soap just to add a little bit of an exfoliant. So if you choose to use either of those, you want to use no more than a tablespoon, because really a little bit goes a very long way. So what I like to do is, if your immersion blender has a high and a low, I only like to use the low in this. And I start, you can see that it's still all liquid, and I just like to start there by mixing that up, and slowly I'm going to add in my lye solution. Now notice I've got my safety goggles on. Safety first, okay? And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to mix this. I've found that with this recipe, it generally takes about 4 to 5 minutes to reach trace. So right now you can see that everything is still just really liquidy. When it comes to trace, you'll kind of notice that it becomes more, it becomes thicker, and it's almost more pudding-like. Okay, so I'm going to try to tilt this just a little bit. Hopefully the shadow is not going to be too bad where you're not going to be able to see. But as I bring the soap up, you can kind of see where I pulled out the immersion blender, the stick blender. And so you can kind of see like all of those ripples and those waves there in the soap mixture. And that's when you know that you have reached trace. And so at this time is when you want to add your essential oils and or your poppy seeds. Today I'm going to use cedar wood. And yes, you saw that right, an entire 15 milliliter bottle, as well as lime essential oil. I think they're a great combination. And I'm going to add just a dash here of the poppy seeds. And just blend that up. And that's it. It is ready. You can see it's kind of become more just pudding-like. I pulled that out and you can see the marks that it makes. And that's when you know that it's come to trace. So I'll be back in just a moment. I'm going to take this out, head on over to the island so that we can pour this into the mold. All right, so I'm back. I've got our mold here. I've got the soap and a spoon here to help me kind of scrape some things out. So I'm just going to pour it in just like that all across the bottom. Okay. And I'm just going to scrape this here with the spoon. Okay, and so you can see that in here. I like to just drop it. Okay, so it has just gone here into the mold, and by tapping it against the counter, I've been able to just flatten it out. So from here, I've cut out just a piece of cardboard from a box, and I'm going to tape it down over the lid. Okay. I have this towel. It's just a beach towel that we haven't used in a couple years. And I take the soap mold and I just wrap it with a towel. So I've wrapped the soap mold in a beach towel, and this is going to help insulate it. From here, the biggest advice that I'm going to give you is you want to place this someplace where the temperature stays pretty constant. In the summertime, it's not going to really give you that much of a problem, but I had a soap making attempt not turn out one winter because we had a huge drop in temperature that night, and it kind of froze the saponification process. So this reaction that's happening right now is going to help create the soap, and when there's an abrupt temperature fluctuation, it seizes it, and so it doesn't continue, and you'll have too much lye left in your soap, and it essentially makes it non-usable. So my biggest advice, just find a small little nook or corner that you can leave it in uninterrupted. It's going to sit like this for 24 hours. And so tomorrow night I'll be back and I will pull it out and you can see what it looks like, and we'll cut it up and I'll explain the rest of the process from there. So a few other thoughts that I just want to share with you is that I have used the recipe that I'm sharing with you that I use frequently because I really like the consistency of the soap and how it turns out. Calls for 1 ounce of essential oil. I have used up to ½ ounce before, but never really lower than that. So you can think about that in terms of one 15 milliliter bottle. Hi, it's been 24 hours since we poured the cold processed soap mixture into the soap mold, and I'm going to pull it out of the mold. I also have a few other supplies with me. I have a ruler, a little plastic knife, and the cutter that I use to cut my soap. So let me adjust this here one moment so that you can see. I have the soap still wrapped up in the towel that I put it in to insulate it. And I am removing the cardboard top that I have. And here you can see that the soap mixture is no longer liquid. So I'm going to peel off the tape on the sides. And what I love about using the parchment paper is that I'm able just to pull the entire block out and remove the wooden case. So here is my soap. I then go ahead and just peel back the parchment paper. And I have this great block of soap. So I have personally found that I prefer a thicker bar of soap. So I then go ahead and grab my ruler, and I like to just make little score marks. I like my bars to be about 1 inch thick. It's still a little soft, which is why you want to cut it after 24 hours. The process of converting the fats and the lye into soap continues for another 2 to 3 weeks. And so after I cut these bars, I still will not be able to use them for another 2 to 3 weeks while they continue to harden and continue with the saponification process. So I've made score marks all across, and then I grab my cutter and I just follow along with that score mark, and here is 1 bar of soap. I love the ridges that this cutter adds to my soap. It smells fantastic, by the way, as I'm cutting this. My mouth is watering as I smell the lime essential oil that I added. It's a great combination, the lime and the cedar wood. I really like it a lot. And so that is it. So I have this bar of soap, and it will continue to harden over the course of the next 2 to 3 weeks. And after that amount of time, they do need air to further harden, so I do leave them out and cover them with another piece of parchment paper. And after 3 weeks, I put them away in a bag that I keep in my bathroom, and whenever my kids or my husband or myself, whenever we're ready for the next bar of soap, we just go in and grab one. So I really hope that you are encouraged and you feel like this is something that you can do. This has just been such a fun process, and something that I really feel like allows me to give back to my family, and so that we know what we're using and what we're putting on our bodies. And it is just a fun activity. I hope you think so too. So let me know any questions that you have, and I look forward to seeing your cold process soap. Take care.